Okay, have you ever felt that intense, almost magnetic pull towards someone who just can't seem to meet you halfway? It is so intoxicating, it's confusing, and let's be honest, it is often completely heartbreaking. And, if you're someone who feels things really deeply, an empath, this whole pattern can be just beyond draining. Today, we're going to get into the psychology behind why we get stuck on emotionally unavailable partners. And I'll tell you, it goes so much deeper than just having a type. So, right out of the gate, let's just ask the big question, the one that probably brought you here. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we keep finding ourselves in this same situation, pouring all of our heart and soul into someone who, well, who just seems to have a wall up? I want you to know this is not a personal failing, not at all. It's a very specific psychological pattern, and it actually has a name. All right, let's get into it. This dynamic is often called the anxious-avoidant trap, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this painful dance where one person's deep, deep need for closeness, often the empaths, crashes directly into another person's deep, deep fear of it. And the result? A painful, repeating, and absolutely exhausting cycle. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because we can actually see how this trap, which just drains empaths dry, really works. It's this four-stage loop that just goes around and around. So, stage one, the anxious partner feels a little bit of distance. Maybe a text goes unanswered for a bit too long. This immediately triggers stage two, the anxious pursuit. They start texting more, calling more, trying desperately to close that gap. But for the avoidant partner, this feels totally suffocating, which leads right to stage three. They pull back even further. And of course, this confirms the anxious partner's absolute worst fear, which kicks off stage four, intense escalation. You can see how this cycle just gets stronger and more painful every single time it goes around. And this right here, this is the cruel genius of this whole cycle. It is a perfect self-fulfilling prophecy. The anxious partner pursues, which just proves to the avoidant person that, yup, closeness really is overwhelming. Then the avoidant partner withdraws, which proves to the anxious person that, yup, they're always going to be abandoned. It's like each person's actions are tailor-made to validate the other's deepest, most painful wounds. So, this brings us to a really crucial question. We talk about these connections having insane chemistry, right? An unbelievable spark. But what if what we're feeling isn't really chemistry at all? What if it's just our nervous system screaming a red flag at us? Just look at this comparison for a second. On the left, yeah, that sounds like what we call chemistry. But now look at the right. The constant thinking about them, that cycle of fear and doubt, followed by that incredible high when they finally text you back. That's not passion, my friend. That's your nervous system going through a roller coaster of anxiety and then sweet, sweet relief. A single crumb of affection feels like an entire feast when you've been starving for it. And you know what? The science actually backs this up. There was this fascinating study that found women were most attracted to men when they weren't sure how the men felt. Not when they knew for sure he liked them, but when it was a 50-50 toss-up. That uncertainty, that not knowing, it creates this preoccupation in our brains that we often mistake for intense attraction.
So what's really going on here is a psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement, and it is literally the most powerful hook there is. Think about a slot machine. You don't get a reward every time you pull the lever, but you get it just often enough that it keeps you standing there pulling that lever, hoping for the next payout. Those little breadcrumbs of affection, they work exactly the same way.
Now, in its most intense form, this cycle can create something called a trauma bond. And let's be crystal clear about this. This is not love. This is a chemical dependency. A trauma bond happens when the very person who is causing all of your distress is also the only person your nervous system thinks can provide relief. It's a neurobiological trap. It has nothing to do with a failure of your heart or your logic. Okay, so we've talked about what the trap is and how it works its magic on us. But now let's go deeper and ask the real question, why? Why are some of us so much more likely to fall into this pattern in the first place? Well, the answer is usually hiding in our unconscious blueprint, that relationship map we started drawing way back in childhood. This quote, wow, it really just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? That lightning bolt feeling you get with a stranger, that sense of just knowing them. So often, it's just your nervous system going, oh, I recognize this feeling. I've been here before. And our brains are wired to think that what's familiar is safe, even when it really, really hurts. There's a term for this drive, repetition compulsion. It's our psyche's unconscious and kind of tragic attempt to go back to the scene of the original crime and fix it. We pick a partner who feels just like that parent who was inconsistent or distant, and we hope so badly that this time, if we're just good enough or loving enough, we can finally make them stay. This is the absolute core of the wounded healer complex. We try to heal someone else to finally heal ourselves. It's not self-sabotage, it's really just a wounded kind of hope. Here's a great way to think about it. Your attachment system is like Google Maps. And if you grew up on these bumpy, unpredictable back roads where love wasn't always a sure thing, well, that's the terrain it knows best. So when you meet someone who offers that exact same roller coaster ride, your internal GPS lights up and says, "Aha, I know this route. This is the way home." And sometimes the person we choose is simply acting as a mirror. Look at that middle row. If you subconsciously believe deep down that you're unlovable or maybe you're too much, you will almost certainly gravitate towards relationships where you constantly feel like you have to prove your worth, to earn their love. It's a tough pill to swallow, but we don't attract who we want. We attract what we unconsciously believe we deserve. Okay, so that's the diagnosis. And I know it's heavy stuff, but you can't change what you can't see, and awareness is always, always the first step to freedom. So the big question now is, how do we actually break out of this painful, exhausting cycle for good? Now, this is so important. It's a huge perspective shift. The work isn't really about getting better at picking partners out in the world. The real work is internal. It's about healing your own patterns so that a stable, secure, kind person no longer feels boring, but instead starts to feel like a deep, welcome relief. So here it is, your new playbook. These are the steps to break the cycle and start attracting partners differently. Number 1 is huge. Reframe boring as safe. You have to learn to sit with the calm that a secure connection provides. Number 3, practice self-soothing, so you can learn to give yourself the reassurance you're always trying to get from other people. And number 5, this might be the most powerful one. When you feel that old push-pull cycle starting up, learn to just name it. Saying, "Hey, I think we're doing our pattern right now," can be an absolute game changer. And this is what real healing feels like. It's the slow understanding that true lasting intimacy isn't built on fireworks and drama, but on a slow, steady, consistent burn. And on a nervous system level, for someone who is used to chaos, calm feels revolutionary. Calm isn't boring. Calm is safe. And over time, you realize that calm is actually the deepest and most profound form of passion there is. So at the end of the day, this whole journey isn't about giving up on love. Not at all. It's about unlearning this toxic belief that love is something you have to chase or earn or suffer for. It's about finally understanding that real connection